Hey there, everyone. This is Aaron, and we're on episode 2 of Stop It. This week, the three amigos, Fraser Gartshore, Jerry Martin, and myself, Aaron Shows, are taking you on a little bit of the backstory, the origin story, as it were, of the pipe organ. We hope you enjoyed the first pilot episode of this podcast, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the future about what makes the three of us organists a bit different from the rest of the organ world. Yes, we are the Organ Rebels, and this is Stop It.
Stop it! Stop it! S-T-O-P, new word, 19. Stop it! Well, then stop it.
Welcome back. It's Stop It time. After the huge success of Stop It pilot version, episode number 1, the three of us have decided to do this again. I'm Fraser Gartshore, I'm middle-aged, and I'm an organist.
I'm Jerry Martin, I'm middle-aged, I'm an organist.
And I'm Aaron Shows, and I am not quite middle-aged, and I'm also an organist.
Well, that's it. The three amigos are back, and it's time to continue our little rascal look at the world of organs and organ music. I think we'll start this little session having a quick run round the room and see what everyone's been up to. Aaron, what have you been up to this past month?
Oh, goodness. This has been a very, very much highlight month of my career. I've had many things that I cannot talk about fully all the way, but I will say that at least in the last few weeks here, I have played organ on a very big movie to come out later this year. And I have also worked with a pretty big name or names as well. I'm going to be playing organ. I've recorded organ for a theme park that is yet to open as well. So it's a unique gigs, recording for entertainment purposes, but using the organ in fun ways and doing things that I don't know how many other organists around the world are doing. How many organists do you know that play, in movies or play in theme parks? And I don't know many of them.
I don't think that exists. I don't think that's even a thing. I think you're a pioneer.
Yeah, the organ thing for theme parks for sure. I don't know maybe Disney somehow has had a organ at some point playing in something, but maybe Haunted Mansion, of course, but someone had to record that. But no, as far as these movies go, this has been a thing for a while, but luckily the organ I got to play is now called the Bar Fox organ, and it's a Wurlitzer from 1928. And the organ was used in many, many films, all the way back to the silent film era, and then later on when Fox had it in the studios, it was used in films like Sound of Music, the wedding scene. It was used in The Day the Earth Stood Still, Patton, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Home Alone, The Witches of Eastwick, which is a John Williams score. Anyway, it was been used through all of history. And I actually heard a story last week about this organ that the man that played on The Sound of Music, the wedding scene in The Sound of Music, on this same Wurlitzer organ, this is a true story, played that gig, that recording session, went home that night and then died of a heart attack. Isn't that so scary? Yes. So the Sound of Music wedding scene, the music you hear there, that was probably the last thing he ever played on the organ, and he went home and died that night. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my God.
So I didn't die. I'm still here. I played. I'm still, the organ.
That means you have more work to do.
I have more work to do. Yes. So the organ has decided that I should live on. But yeah. So that was a cool trivia that I heard this week. But anyway, it was. So that was that. I played for a movie, and I will reveal later on this year what movie that is, and the people that I got to work with, and for this theme park thing. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So that's highlights of my career, and at this point, I don't know how I can top this the rest of the year. I probably won't, but this is where we are. So
that's just amazing.
How about Jerry? How about you? You can tell us about your goings on.
Oh my goodness. Well, actually, Aaron and I have some overlap this month because we're recording this in March. And of course, with my Irish heritage, March is St. Patrick's Day. So there's a lot of things happening in Portsmouth here in preparation for St. Patrick's Day, which is coming up this weekend. So we've talked about organ, but I started out as a traditional Irish fiddler. So I'm playing in our local Celtic band for a couple of events here this weekend. But also, as I think we may have mentioned, my interest in music of, particularly organ music of the turn of the last century, Sir Charles Villiers Stanford, we remember 100 years of his passing, and he is like me, an Irishman living abroad. So I've been really getting stuck into learning the music of Stanford this year. And I've been working on a couple of live streams on my channel. So I'm preparing one of those that's going to be St. Patrick's focused this weekend ahead. So in addition to playing traditional Irish, there's going to be St. Patrick's themed Stanford. And as if that wasn't enough, of course, Easter is coming early this year. And I'm very fortunate living in this small town that we have a very talented group of musicians and a very dedicated director of choral music. So we are preparing St. John's Passion for Good Friday, which is a little over 2 weeks away. I have a day job too sometimes, but so that's it. It's been busy. Nothing quite to top what Aaron just described, but lots of fun for me nonetheless. Fraser, what about you?
Well, I haven't been up to very much at all, actually. I've had a rather, I'm not going to say a boring month, because it certainly hasn't been that way, but I've been basically a stay-at-home dad all month.
Oh.
My better half, Vanessa, she has been very busy with all sorts of other things this month. So I have spent a wonderful month looking after my baby daughter, who's coming up actually for 1 year now, which is quite amazing. And on top of that, I've just been doing what I always do, playing live streams on YouTube, playing the piano, teaching the odd bit of music, trying to practice music in the background, and chatting to you guys. So for me, it's been a very quiet month musically, but I don't think it's going to stay that way.
I don't think so either, because I know you have been accumulating some toys, and with toys comes ideas and plans for future shenanigans. So we're looking forward to hearing all about that in the future.
Oh, yes. Well, there's an awful lot of exciting things that have been added to the Garchor arsenal of audio equipment, shall we say, and there's a very, very exciting reason for that. And yes, more on that very, very soon. Oh well, there we have it, a little roundup of what the guys have been up to for the past few weeks, and it seems like I'm the boring one now. I'm the oldest. I'm obviously just being a boring old guy sitting at home looking after kids, while everyone else is gallivanting around the world doing exciting things, playing for Hollywood music, playing Bach's St. John Passion. I'm not actually very jealous about that. That's a huge work, and that's an awful lot of practice. That's pretty epic stuff to be doing. Are you guys going to pull this off?
Yes. I paused there because there's always the I wonder, and there's always that, right up until the moment of, there's that, oh my gosh, what are we doing? But yes, somehow it all comes together. So I'm going to say, based on past successes, yes. However, I would be lying to say that I'm not anxious about the whole thing. So I'll report back next month.
I remember when I was studying, and part of my studies was obviously conducting, and for some reason, all of our professors, they insisted that we learnt about these grand works by J.S. Bach, the St. Matthew Passion, the St. John Passion, etc., the Mass in B minor, all of these huge works. And we had to learn them, and we actually had to learn parts of them by memory. If you're going to be a conductor, our guys said you should learn these things by memory. And I was forced to learn some of the recitative parts of the St. John Passion by memory. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, exactly. Now, thankfully, that's well over 30 years ago now, so it's long been forgotten. Well, it's not actually. It's about 30 years ago, but it's long been forgotten. But yeah, I'm not jealous of anyone who has to perform that, especially the conductor. That's a huge work to hold together.
Yeah, it really is a lot for the conductor. For me, so I actually never got to do a lot of classical ensemble playing growing up. So that's been something new to me here in Portsmouth. So I'm the organist and I get to hide. I would like to say hide, but the organist never really gets to hide because there is that absolutely hilarious video out there somewhere of some unfortunate organist that had the transposer on during the Hallelujah chorus, and those last chords were just not fun at all because the organ, yes, it blends beautifully with voice and orchestra, but if you hit the wrong notes, oh my gosh, the whole world will know about it. So yes, I get to be. Yes, so I get to be, of course, the continuo, which means I get to pretty much play continuously the whole way through, right?
Pretty much. Well,
Yes.
we're moving towards organ in the church again, and this is exactly what this little stop it session shouldn't be about. And actually, Aaron, you
Right.
already mentioned it today. You were talking about organs in theme parks, talking about organs in studios, in cinemas, in films, and things like that. So maybe something we could talk about today is something a little history lesson of the organ. Maybe not going all the way back to the beginning, and certainly not going too in depth about it all, but we mustn't forget, the organ did not start out as an instrument for the church. That came relatively late in the organ's development. If you look at the entire development of the organ going back to ancient times, and when we say ancient times, we mean pretty much ancient Egypt. Aaron, over to you.
Oh goodness, can I go back that far? I know
Not personally,
for a
obviously.
fact, I know for a fact that the organ, in its first inceptions, was made to entertain, as were most instruments. They were all made for entertainment purposes, and that's what people look for when, especially back in those days when life wasn't too great, and they were looking for ways to escape, and music was the way to do that. And so the organ was one of those things that was a way to, I guess, get the crowds energized and going, and that has carried on through to today. And I'm not sure how this is in Europe, but organs are still used here in sporting events. And if you go to a baseball game or a hockey game, you will oftentimes hear an organ playing between the gameplay, and this is kind of where it all came from, and it's always been an instrument that has gotten the crowds going, and I think that it at some point in I guess it was the 9th century that everything sort of changed. But yeah, if you want to go back that far, I mean, organs, I can speak at least to the Greco-Roman areas where it was all water powered, and they weren't complex instruments as they are today, but they were certainly very loud, and everyone enjoyed hearing them. And that's kind of the earlier parts of it. I don't know about Egypt. What's the Egyptian part of things, Fraser?
As far as I remember, the original, the hydraulis, however you want to pronounce it.
Yes.
I think that originated in ancient Egypt, didn't it? Does anyone remember anything else? My brain is just. My brain reminds me that it was Egypt, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking sort of the Greeks and the Romans, but maybe it was before all that. But it would have been before Christ for sure. That would have been BC. I would have said probably, I don't know, 3rd century BC, something like that. It was if I could look up on a Wikipedia article, be fact checked here.
Oh, we don't want to do that. We want to be spontaneous.
But,
absolutely. But they were certainly the first keyboard instruments, isn't that right? Certainly long before pianos and harpsichord and everything else, the very first keyboard instruments were organs. So that's kind of where it all began. And as far as an instrument that was capable of producing tones, we talk about polyphony, many tones or many sounds together. The predecessor of the modern synthesizer, and every recorded music to this day. I'll chat a little bit about this later on, but even how pipe organs were used before recorded music was mainstream. So organs, absolutely have always been part of entertainment, and it's so fun to think about this and explore this side of the instrument that for many folks, people just think about being in the church, right? It's just amazing.
Yeah. I think what was probably the first time that the organ moved from the entertainment venues into the church was probably the 9th century, sometime in 800 something, and it was Charles the Great in Aachen, Germany, which is not too far from where you are. Maybe, I don't know, Fraser.
It's about an hour and a half from here. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time that it was. I think it was gifted or something that was put into church there, and has ever since been somewhat in the church. And from that point on, it was, I guess, thought of more as a very serious spiritual instrument, I guess, of some sort. But I think has also retained its other qualities. And as we moved along through the centuries, you think about organs that were used in parlors or in people's houses that had a lot of money for entertainment purposes. This was for concerts and gatherings of friends and things. And so it was the fact that it could cover all the sounds of a big ensemble of instruments was kind of its key, that one person could do all of these things by themselves. And I guess you're going to save money too if you're not going to have to hire a bunch of players to come play at your party. You can have one person come play.
Exactly.
And it can sound like a big group. But yes, as far as playing at sporting events, which has carried through to today, it's the reason it's so big is that it can make such a big sound. Yes, and it can be big enough that played outside in front of large crowds, it can be heard. Just like bagpipes, which is another one of those instruments that should only be played outside.
Yes.
The times that I've had to play funerals with an organ and bagpipe, and they have the bagpipe player standing next to me at the console of the organ,
Oh
you're
my
thinking, this was an
gosh.
instrument used for wartime. You're supposed to have the bagpipe play across the hill over there to scare the army on this side of the hill. And here we are
Exactly.
inside walls playing this thing. No, the organ... the organ is one of those things that can be loud enough to play outside, but as we know, can also be very, very quiet, and has a huge dynamic range. So I would say, originally entertainment purposes outside and for large crowds, and then later brought inside in the church. Anyone want to sort of talk on more
I think
about that?
if you want to talk about large crowds and maybe entertainment in a very, very loose sense of the term, my my definition there. Whether it's an arena full of people at a sporting event, whether it's a concert hall full of people going to see a concert, or whether it's 400 people sitting in a church praising God, it's one instrument is capable of accompanying, but also drowning out. It's capable of so many things. It's capable of creating emotions and stirring emotions, and I think that's the beauty of the organ as an instrument. Interesting, you mentioned something about people having organs in their private homes. Jerry, you were recently at someone who has an enormous organ in his private home. In fact,
indeed.
Doesn't he have a private home around his organ? I think that's probably the easiest way to say it.
Pretty much. So we're talking about one of the largest, certainly here in the United States, maybe even one of the largest home installations in the world. So the home of Dr. Eugene Blackstone, the Blackstone Residence Pipe Organ. And he's a physician who had, throughout his entire professional career, began with just collecting small amounts of pipe work in his original home. And then when he moved up to Cleveland, had this beautiful custom home built, and the organ continued to be expanded. It's just a magnificent instrument. But that is not without precedent, and that's something that really fascinates me as we've been talking about the organ as an instrument of entertainment. So yes, you can think of the organ in the church, and I think organs were commonly maybe brought into play when, we didn't have big orchestras and whatnot. You had a single player, single instrument that could fill a space with sound and just transport people away, which is just truly amazing to think about. So here in the United States, we have the great tradition of the organist that I'm passionate about, who brought great symphonic works to essentially town hall organs around the United States. And then, of course, we had fairground organs, and we had and continue to have organs in sports fields and whatnot. But I am really interested in kind of the history of the residence organ, because these instruments were not just designed to be played by a physical player. Of course, they certainly could. But these instruments really came into their own in think about the Roaring '20s and right before recorded music took off. So you had, if you visit pretty much any of the big stately homes in the United States, think about the Biltmore down in Asheville, you have pipe organs in these homes. And most of them, in addition to having a console that you could play, had a player mechanism whereby, and you had recording houses that made these basically vacuum reels. So it's punch paper that was loaded into these machines, and they could play recordings that were made by Lemaire and Hollins and all of the rest. In fact, I'll just mention briefly, a bucket list item for me. Did you know that the Titanic had a pipe organ?
Yes, indeed.
So it wasn't just the players who played Amazing Grace while the ship went down. There was a pipe organ on there too. But the sister ship, the Britannic, never really took sail. But the organ from the Britannic exists today. And I was just looking this up. It is actually in Switzerland, the Museum for Music Automaton in Seewin in Switzerland. So they have the pipe organ, which was basically the twin of the organ that was on the Titanic. And these organs, of course, they would have been in the big ballrooms, right? So maybe in between, you would have the band playing, or you would have big band playing. But then you would also have these orchestral numbers played by, so instead of Lemaire having to set sail on the Titanic or the Britannic, they had paper rolls of his recordings, which they could load up and play. And these instruments are so historically interesting because fully restored today, the Britannic organ, they actually have a series of these scrolls recorded by Lemaire and all of the rest, where you can actually hear those organists play with their registrations, their cadence, all the rest. Just absolutely amazing. And this is preceding vinyl or phonographs and all the rest. Basically, this is MIDI before MIDI was cool. Which is just absolutely fantastic. But not only were these organs on steamships, but they were in people's homes, and you could imagine going to the Biltmore, and maybe they didn't have a visiting organist, so we're having a little evening soiree, so we're going to listen to some Strauss and whatnot, and you would just pull those rolls off, load them onto the instrument, and then that would play while, dinner was served, or, while the sherry was passed around and whatnot. Just amazing. So this is an absolutely fascinating side of the pipe organ that people don't think about, but just really, really interesting.
But you've reminded me of, I'm not sure if it's one of the earliest residential organs, certainly one of the most famous, Blenheim Palace in England, where the Churchill family covered. That organ from the 1800s. It's an organ that's playable by a player, but it's also playable via paper rolls. I think actually it's in that case it's wooden rolls and things like that. But that must have been one of the first of the largest. Is this the organ that has been played by a player on this podcast? Is that right, Aaron?
Yes.
You played it, right?
Last year. It's in Oxfordshire, how you say it. But I went there January of last year in 2023, and I gave a concert there of film music. And it was the organ. Oh my god! The organ there is part of the tour of the palace. It's sort of toward the very end because it's in the library. And it's a Willis organ, and it's amazing that it's still mostly functioning. And I think people usually go through those tours and hear, like I said in the last episode, the top 10 composers that people play on the pipe organ. But when I was doing it, it was there was sort of a little bit of a crowd that gathered. I was playing Harry Potter. I was playing all John Williams stuff, Star Wars, and did some Henry Mancini, and it was kind of cool to do that on this instrument that I think was intended to be this thing that entertained people that were there in the library. But it was pretty incredible to know that these instruments, they were purchased not to be in a church; they were purchased to be in someone's home. Now, obviously, it was usually for the people that were much more well off, that could afford these things. But with the advent of things like Hauptwerk, I mean, it's now playable in anyone's home. If you have
Exactly.
you don't need six figures of money to buy an instrument. You can do it in your own home for much cheaper. It's pretty incredible that was a custom that has kind of fallen out of fashion. But these organs still exist, and I guess that was kind of a big thing too with music like one of my favorite composers from the Romantic era, Lefebvre Vely. You think about his music is I love his music so much, and it's definitely him trying to do parlor or opera or fun, party
Right.
music in church. And it's incredible because he was translating all those things that you would hear during the week at parties, and playing on Sunday morning. And
Can you
it was
imagine?
just so cool. Yeah.
Imagine going to Saint-Sulpice on a Sunday morning. He was organist in Saint-Sulpice, don't forget. And
Yes.
now, okay, he wouldn't necessarily... Would he have had the Kavai call organ to play on? I'm not sure. He would have had the predecessor, I think. Is that right?
Probably was.
I think there was a predecessor.
Yeah.
But could you imagine going
Yeah.
and hearing sort of all that wonderful march music, waltz music, sort of
Yeah.
bolero music, crazy stuff during a church service? Actually, here's an interesting thing. We're talking about organs that weren't designed for the church but put in private homes. But I can think of one example of an organ that was designed for a private home but ended up in a church instead. Jerry's nodding.
I can think of a couple too, actually.
Oh,
I'm
over
wondering
to
which
you.
one you're thinking about. Actually,
I'm thinking
well,
of
first of
I'm
all-
thinking of Paris. What are you thinking about?
okay, so I'm actually thinking of England.
Oh.
So because one of the instruments that I've been enjoying as a Hauptwerk sample set recently for Stanford, and it is perfect for that, it is the Armley Schultz in St. Bartholomew's in Leeds. And that instrument was designed for a private residence by the Schultz Company. It was one of the earlier instruments that they brought to England at a time before the Willises and everything had taken off. And ultimately, that organ found its way from the private residence into a church, which is where it exists today. But that instrument was instrumental in informing Willis and how he approached mixtures and some of the big flutes and whatnot. He kind of studied the Schultz German craftsmanship. So the European, that was kind of how some of those sounds made it to England. But yes, that precedent exists where an organ might have been built for a private residence and then well, honestly, here's another example. There's no organ in this private residence, but here in Portsmouth, there is a magnificent home on top of a hill here that was built back in the 1920s. And the original owners and designers did not live long enough to enjoy it. So the building was donated to the church. It became a convent, and then time moves on. The nuns left. It was bought, and it's now a private residence again, but they're renovating it, and they've opened it to the public, and you can go there and stay as a bed and breakfast and whatnot. But one of the things they were so excited about as they brought me on a tour of that residence was, the current owners didn't fully understand what this was all about, but I was just geeking out about this. It has a pipe chamber in the basement, and these homes, when they had these pipe organs installed here in the States, rather than necessarily having the pipework out in the open, they would put them in a pipe chamber in the basement or nearby, and then they would have this conduit. So there was this great big open space, almost like an air conditioning vent with a curved ceiling that opens via a grill, a perforated wooden grill, into the dining hall. So what they weren't really sure what to do with it, but they had realized that it had acoustical properties, and they put a Bluetooth speaker down there just to enjoy it being projected out into the space.
wonderful.
So it's a 1920s amplification, but that allowed all of the pipework to merge. Anyhow, just architectural curiosity. But going back to the idea of homes being built and organs being put in them. So tell me about Paris, Fraser, because I'm not sure my brain is triggering with the one you're thinking about.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, let me ask Aaron if he knows which organ I'm talking about.
I don't think I do. No, something in
Ooh.
Paris. No.
Yeah, the modern, I'm going to say modern because it's not that modern, but the second organ to be put in Sacré-Cœur, one of the largest and most famous churches of them all. That organ started out live as a private residence organ. And it came to
my
Sacré-Cœur
gosh.
much later. It was one of the last Cavaillé-Coll organs to have been completed. It wasn't actually completed by Cavaillé-Coll. There were other bits added afterwards and things like that. And it was in this private residence. And the organ in Sacré-Cœur was in such a terrible state. They obviously wanted a huge Cavaillé-Coll organ because all the other big French cathedrals are in and around Paris had a Cavaillé-Coll. So they said, right, well, we'll have this one. Thank you very much. And the organ from Sacré-Cœur was originally a residence organ. And now it's one of the most unheard instruments in the world, sadly, because...
My gosh.
Does anyone know why you hardly ever hear the organ in Sacré-Cœur?
No.
No idea.
Sacré-Cœur is basically 24 hours, 24 hours, 7 days a week church service. It never stops. It's one of those places that has the eternal, it's an eternal worship, as it were, whatever you want to call it. I can't remember the actual term for it, but it's one of those eternal worships. So the organ very rarely gets played properly. It hardly ever gets tuned. There are very few recordings of it. There are never any concerts on it, etc., etc., etc. But it's one of the most amazing Cavaillé-Coll organs in the world, and it deserves to be heard more. Crazy
Amazing.
Story.
24/7 in church. Wow, that does sound like...
That's just amazing.
Do we want to do that? I don't know.
I can think of some people who might want to.
I can as well, yes.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. If the three of us ever make it to Paris together, which I do hope we do one day, we must see if we can sneak ourselves into and onto the organ in Sacré-Cœur. It is theoretically accessible, but we'd have to play something liturgical on it. We wouldn't be allowed to play Henry Mancini or John Williams or Stanford's Danny Boy. We wouldn't be allowed to do that on it.
Well, Aaron could probably play a meditation on something and hide the melody. Actually, both of you could do that.
That would be a
fun.
good fun. I did that the other week, but I'm not going to tell you what melody I used. It was rather naughty.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
So apart from being used in homes and in coliseums and arenas, what other places can we think of that the organ is used that is apart from the church? Concert halls, obviously. You see them in played with orchestras sometimes. Either people think of the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony as having a large organ part for that. Yeah, so theme parks is not a place that I normally think of for organs, but I mean, you don't see the organs usually there unless it's sort of one of those sort of grinder organs, the smaller versions.
The fairground organ kind of thing, yeah.
Fairgrounds, yeah, that's another version. And actually, the organ stuff that I recorded this week that was for the theme park is sort of that carnival sort of music. So it was sort of it's going to be used in that way, but it's the organ that was used as a Wurlitzer organ. So what other places can we think of?
I guess here's an interesting question leading on from Aaron's thoughts there is, as we're trying to think about historical and unusual places organs have been, and perhaps, actually, I'm now thinking, because it's approaching lunchtime, I'm like, pizza. The American pizza parlors that have Wurlitzer pipe organs, and there's a couple of those that, it's basically the Wurlitzers that were rescued, and it became a thing here in the States, and there are several of them in the U.S. My favorite is Orgenstoff Pizza down in Mesa, in just outside Phoenix. That is just amazing. But I guess here's the next question. where should we bring the organ now that we can, with technology and Hauptwerk, load it up in our truck with some speakers and go to unusual places? So
Actually,
I don't know. Maybe our listeners have some ideas. That would be
that's not a bad
interesting
idea.
to
But
hear.
actually, when you said loaded up on trucks and taken around the place, don't forget the world of the touring organ also used to happen.
Yes.
I think one of the most famous was the old. He was actually. Well, he moved, I think, to Canada, but he was originally a British organist, Reginald Foote, and he had this huge 5-manual Muller organ made for him, but it was
Goodness.
transportable. It was an enormous 5-manual Muller theatre organ. It landed up in, I think, as far as I know, Pasadena. Aaron, you must know about this, in the Civic Center in Pasadena. Is that not the organ that's
There
in
is
the
a theater
Civic
organ
Center
there. There is an organ there,
I think
yeah.
that is the original touring organ from Reginald Foote, and that was 5 huge trucks would travel around the country. This was in the States. It would travel around the country, and the organ would be sort of assembled every night. Concerts would be played, then it would be dismantled, put back in the truck, and off they went again. And I suppose I don't know where they did this. Hockey parks. I'm imagining it was large car parks basically, but
Right.
open air events, and there are some open air organs out there, aren't we? We're thinking of San Diego.
Yes.
There's one in Kufstein in Austria, just across the border. Can anyone think of any other open air organs?
I don't know. It's difficult because of temperatures and things.
It
but
is
yeah,
difficult.
And of
Yeah,
course,
that-
you have
that
the,
is-
and the zero. Although you're in the open air, the zero acoustic. I think you've both heard the organ in San Diego live, and it's the most
Yes.
dry, crisp acoustic.
really
It's-
is.
It doesn't lend
It
itself to organ
requires
music, does it?
it requires special technique to play it. But actually, when I visited that organ and got to hear it played, just amazing experience. But I loved reading a little bit about the story, how when that organ was initially commissioned, most of the organ builders refused. They wanted nothing to do with it. They said, this is not possible. This can't be done.
Yeah.
And then I think it was the Austin Organ Company finally stepped up to the plate and said, yep, we'll do it. And it's still there.
It's still there.
Amazing. Really amazing.
It is, isn't it? So where should we take organs next? Well, we've got private homes. I suppose you have schools. There are some organs in hospitals, believe it or not. Mainly a hospital chapel, I suppose, but there are some
Yes.
in hospitals. Any kind of religious establishment. Arenas, parks, on
There's
the
an
road.
organ
I think
in-
we're kind of running out of ideas.
Yeah, there's an organ in one of the underground stations in London as well, and I've played that one. It's sort of
Oh,
repurposed
that's
from a
right.
church. Yeah,
Well, it's
that's
just
one
been
of the-
put there not that long, a couple of years ago, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's one of the
yeah,
sort of
and-
free-to-play kind of things, isn't it? Like the pianos dotted around train stations, that kind of thing.
Yes, there's a little box and then on the wall you push the button, you get 30 minutes of air that turns on, and you get to play it. It's kind of cool.
Oh, that's amazing. I would love to see that at
fun
some
place.
point.
So that's the kind of thing. I mean, train stations and bus stations and things where you usually will see a piano. People can play boogie woogie and things, but that's a place where the potential for the organ to be seen and people to know that it exists outside of the church. That's one of those things that could be a really cool high traffic area. And I think that's kind of a big part of what needs to happen is that since it has been in the church and in the concert hall, is that people haven't seen the instrument in other places enough times to know that it can function in other places.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. And I mean, even if you own an instrument, say you own a guitar, you're much more likely to play it if it's sitting out somewhere you can visually see it than if it's in a case somewhere or put somewhere in a back room and you have to go get it out to go practice it. So I think
Right.
that's another big thing to have it being physically seen in places to kind of bring it back into the public light, I think. So
Wow. Yeah.
but I think that's kind of the next place that it needs to go. It just needs to be seen in more public places.
So all of these disused organs in churches, what we need to do is we need to get them out of there. We need to get them installed in open public spaces where they can be played freely.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I know. Let's get some of the small instruments, like get them in the wine bars and whatnot. I mean, how cool would that be?
Yeah, that would be cool. Wine connoisseurs and then people in the background playing Buxtehude. No, maybe not.
Yes.
So you would have the wine snobs and the organ snobs meeting in one place.
I think that would be, opportunity for cross-pollination, sharing of ideas.
Do we want that? Yes, we do. Of course we do. Of course we do.
To be continued for future conversations, indeed.
To be continued. But I think, yeah, Jerry, you asked the question already. Listeners out there in listener world, comment. Let us know. Let us know. Where do you think? Where would you like to see or hear an organ be played?
And perhaps some of our international friends are there unusual installations that you know about that we should talk about? That need to be heard more about. It's again, historically it has been such an important instrument, and I think one of the Fraser, you mentioned about the touring organ, so I was actually just thinking about perhaps one of the more recent performers who was famous for a touring organ was Cameron Carpenter his touring organ. And I actually had an opportunity to hear him during one of his U.S. tours, and he was making a point of trying to visit places where pipe organs were not, or were, where folks wouldn't be likely to hear that. So it was when I was working at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, but he did not come to Lexington. He visited Danville, which is a small liberal arts college town, perhaps an hour south of Lexington, so way out in the countryside. So he brought his touring organ, they installed it in the college auditorium and filled that auditorium for a couple of nights with folks that would never have heard. And, the music he proceeded to play, yes, he did play some of the traditional standards, but then he morphed into, we had theater, he played blues, he played, Gershwin, and people were just left amazed. So we need folks to do that kind of thing, and we can certainly do that with modern technology. I think part of the issue with folks bringing touring organs out is historically, as organs got bigger and bigger, before we got into the modern era where we have computerized technology to help us, it would be rather hard to bring a wonderful cavacal on the road, because it's not just the tons of pipe work and tracker action and everything that goes with it, but it's also the acoustic, which is so important. However, we're now in a modern era where we can bring simulated versions of that and can be very easily loaded up on the back of a truck and brought to a wine bar. So
definitely
there's a challenge for our fellow organists out there.
That's true. Actually, am I not right in saying, Jerry, you actually have, or at least you had, I think you've donated it to the local church, but you have a semi-portable Hauptwerk installation, is that correct?
Yes, indeed. Over all the years, my Hauptwerk installation, much like I currently have a PC that is ill and in pieces on the floor upstairs. Well, likewise, my Hauptwerk projects, there's the main one I use, but Hauptwerk is so modular that it's been through various iterations. And yes, that most of the bits of that are down at the church. They basically replaced the Kilgan while she was out of action last summer. But that portable, I've actually played Hauptwerk outside in the garden for the birds, because why not?
There you go. And
there's a video on the channel, yes.
Did the birds disappear, or did they stay and listen?
So, well, they disappeared at first, but then they came back and they said, whatever, we're just going to keep eating our seed and getting on with our business and just let that nut just be nuts with the squirrels.
Did you play Messiaen too, though?
Oh my gosh, what a missed opportunity. Aaron should be grinning from ear to ear at this point, about Birdsong and Messiaen. It's just wonderful stuff, right?
Oh, goodness, yeah. For those that don't know, Messiaen's music is often based in Birdsong, yes. And I have had teachers in the past who were so fascinated by such things that you would find them along the college campuses staring at trees, listening to the birds, trying to to interpret these songs. Yes. Oh, the fun times of college years. But it's that's the thing, is you can take it virtually anywhere now, and with the modern technology, you really can play the organ anywhere, and I think it just takes the right mindset of those that are willing to do these kind of things, to carry it into new and creative places. Because that's what will help it survive, is that it has to be in the public eye, as it has always been. But I think a topic for future episodes is how it has gone the other way for many years. But that will be a future discussion.
Ooh.
And I indeed. Now, and as I'm kind of thinking about my thoughts on, what is it makes the organ so special? Well, there is so much, the history, the variety of music, what it's capable of. But when people who don't understand the difference between the piano and the organ, for example, will ask me, well, isn't it just, oh, you've got 3 pianos to play? Well, there's the organ is so much more multidimensional. I mean, every instrument has its dimensions, whether it's, loud to soft and low pitches to high pitches. But the really amazing thing that you can do with the organ compared to other instruments is how you can layer sounds together, right? So our multiple manuals and divisions. So you're basically in control of an orchestra, whether it's a big band or a symphony orchestra. And certainly there's organ music for its own right, but that is what's so wonderfully gratifying as an organist, is that you really can be a one-man band. And that is something that is really special about the organ, whether it is a completely traditional pipe-based instrument or one of our modern, sample-based instruments, and all of the other weird and wonderful organs that exist in between in those spaces. But that's what's special about the organ, is the ability to layer sounds together. And it gets your brain thinking in a very different way, where you're kind of responsible for multiple instrumental parts at the same time. The bass line, the accompaniment, the melody, and everything in between. And it's just so much fun. And that's really what the public needs to grasp, or what young musicians need to grasp, is that creative opportunity out there.
I think we've all been in the position where there's been that little anecdote. I've had it several times, I'm sure you have as well, where you've been playing an organ where the console is visible and the pipes are detached miles away, and somebody will come up afterwards and say, how does all the sound come out of that little box? Meaning, of course, the console. And then you point up to the pipe work. What do you mean pipe work? Yes, those are pipes, organ pipes. They're making the sound. What do you mean? But it sounds like a clarinet, but it sounds like a trumpet, but it sounds like this. I said, no, it's all perfectly capable. But so this box is not making any sound. No, this is just controlling the sound. It sounds miles away over there. I think we've all had that little comment at some point. Yeah.
Yes,
and it is wonderful. My favorite comment. Well, first of all, I think as musicians, one of the things that unites us, music is wonderful, but when you connect with another person, when you play something and somebody comes up to you and says, "Wow, that was great," or you transport them away for a little bit, but all the more when they come up and say, "I didn't know the organ could do that."
Yeah, that's the best one.
Mission accomplished.
That's it. Those are my favorite comments on any of my YouTube videos, when someone writes, "Oh my goodness, I'd never heard anyone play that on the organ before. I didn't know it could do that. I thought the organ could only do XYZ." Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So, well, as we're coming to the end here, I am actually recording my contribution on a new toy. And yes, I don't just like music, but I like all of the technology that goes into that. I am currently recording this on a Zoom H4 Essentials, which is a 32-bit float recorder. Oh my gosh, what is all of that? Well, I think we should talk about some of the fun technology items that we all enjoy and how it interfaces with music, because I think this is also going to be super important for the future of organ. I don't know. I think we should come up for a name for this segment. What do you guys think? Do we have any ideas?
What are we talking about? All the kit we use, for example, where each of us are using AKG microphones, and each of us is recording those microphones on a Zoom recorder. Are we looking for sponsors for the channel? I think we are.
Oh, but maybe. Yes, I think we might be looking for sponsors. But I mean,
need a name.
So our podcast is Stop It. But what are some ideas, Aaron? You can come up with fun ideas.
We're good with words. You've got that silvery tongue.
Yes, well, I think a while back we were talking about something, and this is before we've been recording today, but Fraser, you mentioned the most watched TV show of all time.
Top Gear.
Top Gear.
I think I know where this is going.
Yes, and that is the fact that since we are called Stop It, and we are involving the organs and organ stops, why don't we call this section, wait for it, Stop Gear.
Oh, yes.
Stop Gear!
Vroom, vroom.
Yes!
Stop
Excellent.
Gear. It has to be. It absolutely has to be. Oh, my goodness.
All right. I love it.
Gear.
I'm in. All right, definite
too.
future
Boss.
segment. So I think we could probably go on for hours. So what we're going to have to do is we will have to maybe make a short list of some of the cool tech that we use, or like I said, I've got this cool new recorder. What's cool about it? Why is 32-bit float relevant to the organ world? So
Ooh,
stop
that's-
gear, watch this space,
Definitely.
Yeah.
or
I
listen
love
to
it.
this space even.
Listen to this space. Ladies and gentlemen, that has pretty much been our second episode of Stop It. However, we have already planned our third episode. What's coming next, ladies and gentlemen? We are going to introduce you to why on earth we decided to take up this bizarre instrument. Who inspired us to take up this bizarre instrument? And more importantly, why are we still doing it after all these years?
Indeed. That does it for episode 2 of Stop It, an Organ Rebels podcast with your hosts, the three amigos, Fraser Gart-Shore, Jerry Martin, and myself, Aaron Shows. We hope you've enjoyed this look back at pipe organ history and how the organ has survived for millennia, and we hope will continue to survive for many, many more years to come, unless there's some kind of apocalyptic event that occurs that we can't guarantee whether or not that will happen. But anyway, this podcast comes out once a month on the 4th Saturday of the month, so check back in with us in April, and we'll see you then on
Stop it!